Namaste everyone. I welcome you all to this book launch event of Garuda's latest book, The Viper, authored by Sri Rajesh Singh. Before we move ahead in the program, let me welcome our honorable guest, Sri Arvind Gupta ji, who had served the nation as Deputy National Security Advisor and currently serving as the Director of
Namaskar.
Vivekananda International Foundation. Namaste, sir. Sri Ashwin Sanghi ji, who does not need an introduction. He is a New York Times best-selling author. Welcome, Ashwin Sanghi ji. Sri Rajesh Singh ji, who is the author of The Viper. I welcome you all to this book release ceremony. Before we proceed, I would like to speak briefly about the Garuda Prakashan. Garuda Prakashan got started in 2017, and in this small period of time, it has a lot of bestsellers in its basket, including Urban Naxals by Vivek Agnihotri, Saffron Swords by Manushi Sinha, Saraswati Civilization by Major General G.D. Bakshi, Unbreaking India by Sanjay Dixit, and Monica Arrora's Delhi Rights 2020, the book which created history after getting deplatformed by Bloomsbury. More than 15,000 copies were pre-booked on garudabooks.com in just 24 hours. Apart from English, Garuda is bringing books in different Indian languages, including Hindi, Kannada, Tamil, Bangla, Odia, etc. We deliver our books internationally. So for that, you just have to send a WhatsApp message on our WhatsApp number. We at Garuda believe in excellent quality of product as well as services. Now I won't take much time. I would like to request our honorable guest to just release the book by holding a copy of it in your hands. So here is the book. You all can get it from garudabooks.com, from amazon.in, from Flipkart, and stores near your place. Okay. So great. Here's the back and
Yeah.
here's the book. Yeah. Okay. So now I would like to invite the author, Sri Rajesh Singh, to speak about his book and tell people what they are going to get if they buy this book. Sri
Thank you,
Rajesh.
Ankur. Yeah, thank you, Ankurji. Uh, I began writing this book sometime in August, September last year, 2020. I had already done a non-fiction, which is titled Portraits of Hindutva from Harappa to Ayodhya. And I had all completed writing my second book on non-fiction, Bahubalis of Indian Politics, and was waiting for the publication of my second book. Meanwhile, I had also completed two other manuscripts of non-fiction, which are now in the pipeline. So basically, when I started writing this book, I had done 4 books on non-fiction, and fatigue had set in. I wanted to do something else. So, itna non-fiction. I mean, and I said that it's time that I take a break. But I didn't want to take a break from writing. So I thought, why not try fiction? I had never done fiction before. I had read a lot of fiction. All my life I have been reading fiction, thrillers, there's that. Ashwin G's books, of course, have been a staple diet over the last few years. I think I've got all his books. I don't know if all his books, I've got 6 of his books. If that comprises all, I don't know. But 6 of his books I have, and I've been reading them. I've been reading other authors, of course. Crime thrillers was always my passion. I used to read a lot of crime thrillers, some trash, of course. Others quite good, and people like Dan Brown and then authors like there's so many. So and then all these Nordic authors who have suddenly come, Scandinavian authors who suddenly emerged over the last 7-8 years. So this fiction was in my mind, but I wasn't sure if I could do a crime thriller because crime again requires a certain kind of understanding of police functioning and investigations, etc., etc. So, and I hadn't read much on that. अच्छा उस वक्त क्या हुआ? I was also coincidentally reading a lot about the emergence of militancy in Jammu and Kashmir. So I was reading a lot of material, कैसे शुरू हुआ, क्या हुआ, how the initial signals were missed by the authorities that they thought that this is a one-off. Then it went on escalating. So while reading that, then this famous episode of the then Home Minister's daughter being abducted and then released later on by JKLF, Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front. So while reading that, somehow it struck me that why not use the kidnapping as the beginning of a fiction book, and then reimagine the kidnapping, reimagine everything else that happens after that, very different from what actually happened, and create something out of it. So I had a starting point. The starting point was the abduction. I didn't have a middle. I didn't have the end. So I began the starting point and started evolving it, developing it. So 5-6 chapters उसमें चले ही गए. And while writing those chapters, I continued to think on what next. And that's how the other chapters came. One climax, and the second climax, and the third climax, and the final climax. All of that evolved as I continued to write. I didn't have it in mind. There was no clear structure of the plot in. I don't know how other authors do, but I just could not think beyond a certain level at a point. So then that's how the book got written. And I wrote this book in 2 months flat. That's how I got into fiction writing. It was a novel experience, but it was also interesting because to me it seemed like I was living all the drama that I was creating, fictionalizing in my book. So that's how I came to write this book.
Great. So Rajeshji, when I was reading your book, then I guess most of the people are aware of the real incident upon which you have weaved the story, but you have recreated all those events. You have I can say you have created a different character, who was not there in India, if I'm not wrong. So can I ask you who is your inspiration, or who was your inspiration behind the Viper?
No, I don't think there was any inspiration behind the Viper. As I said, I was
Okay.
reading the book. I was reading the book and then reading this material on all of these incidents in Kashmir, and that's how I came. I Now, if you're asking me who was the inspiration behind creating the protagonist, that is the Viper here, then I would not say one person. There have been several NSAs with their own friends and whatever. So a
Yes.
little bit I think is there of everybody else. But it's easy. It's easy to say that the character resembles more the present NSA than than the others. There are elements, certainly. I would not deny that there are elements. His police background, for example, much of it I fictionalized, but he certainly had a stellar background. Then as a spy, the way he embedded himself in enemy ranks and all of that, that's all
Yes.
known. So not as an inspiration, but as a source of my
Yes.
book. Certainly, uh, the chief character has an NSA has you see I'll tell you one thing. This is my belief that however much fiction you write, there has to be a non-fictional element. Let's say you can conceive of something very fictional. You can conceive of a creature with a lion's head, with a man's torso, with a fin of a fish. But the fish is real, the man is real, the lion is real. You can create something, but we need to have a base. And the base has to be non-fictional. Also, over the years in journalism, as part of my career in journalism, I keep reading all of these. And so maybe you can say it was a lazy way out to pick up on characters and incidents which happened and then to reimagine them. So yes, there are a lot of characters apart from the protagonist who you can relate to in some form or the other up to a particular extent. But beyond that, it's all fiction, and you really cannot say that this man actually did it because he never did it.
Yes.
So that's how it happened.
Yeah. So today we are having the best-selling author Shri Ashwin Sanghi ji with us. So Ashwin ji, you are considered to be the king of this particular thriller fiction genre. So my question is to you. You must have read this book, and means how did you find it? And means will you recommend to readers to read it, buy it, or means yeah?
Of course. Uh, I must tell you, Ankurji, I read the book over it took me a few hours to read because, for anyone who is slightly familiar with current affairs and current events, you will find lots and lots of things that will make you realize the inspiration behind that particular figure that is being mentioned by Rajesh. And I had many of those. I mean, in that span of जो 3 या 4 घंटे में मैंने वो किताब पढ़ी, there must have been at least maybe around 30, 40 times when I said, oh, I think this is the inspiration, oh, this is what I think it is. And that is what makes this a very, very enjoyable book for a person. And the other part of it, of course, is that ultimately what is fiction? I mean, when I had just written my first book, The Rosabal Line, that was in 2007, 2008, a journalist asked me that, what is your qualification to be a fiction writer? Right? Matlab, aapka to, you have an MBA in finance and you belong to a Banya Marwadi background. So suddenly आप एक दिन सोचते हो कि आप historical fiction लिख सकते हैं. So I said, during my years when I was growing up, my mother always used to say that I was a bloody good liar. कि मैं झूठ बिल्कुल सच्चे फेस के साथ I could narrate. And ultimately, what are we as fiction writers? We are liars. We are making up a story. But the other part of this formula of telling lies, then that part of the formula says that if you must tell a lie, then tell the lie as close to the truth as possible. Because then the lie becomes that much more believable. And that is what Rajesh ji has picked up in terms of this particular book. Because everything is based on something that has factually happened. Which means, in other words, that when you're reading this, at times you could feel as if you are reading a drama which is very, very real. So I want to congratulate Rajesh for this particular novel, because it does not read like a novel. It reads like almost, in some ways, something far more real than just simply fiction. And that comes across very clearly in this book.
Very nice. So would you recommend readers to buy this book, get it, and
Absolutely. I would say that besides the fact that it is an entertaining and interesting story, I have always, people ask me, what is your objective as a fiction writer? And I say my objectives as a fiction writer are three. And all those three words start with the letter E. My first objective is to entertain. Because if I cannot entertain you, then you will not turn the page. The second objective is to educate. Maybe by reading this book, you may pick up a few things which you did not know earlier. And the third part is to enlighten. That by the time that you reach the end of the book, you start thinking, why did I not think of it this way? And that is the aha moment. जहाँ पर बत्ती ऑन हो जाती है and you suddenly realize, अरे, this is a moment of enlightenment. So entertain, educate, enlighten, and the proportion of that has to be 70% entertain, 20% educate, 10% enlighten. And I would say that if you are simply looking to pick up a thriller, then it does the job of entertaining. But if you are looking for a little more than that in terms of educating yourself, then this is a great way of being able to do that, because it refers to very, very current historical events, political issues, current affairs, And all of that has been presented to you in a very interesting package. So I definitely recommend the book.
Thank you so much, Ashwinji. We are having Arvind Gupta ji, who has been uh, former deputy NSA. And so, sir, I would like to ask you, as Rajesh ji has created a different character, and which was a, we can say that it is a fictional character. But my question is, means in real life situation, could it be an alternative solution for that particular situation? What do you think?
Thank you, Ankur ji, for inviting me to this very interesting conversation, and listening to Rajesh ji and Sanghi ji. I have learned in the last few minutes a little bit about how a thriller is written, and I'm also tempted. but that apart, but that apart, uh, I think it's a great effort which Rajeshji has made, and it's not just in terms of that a book would sell. Of course, it entertains, educates, enlightens, as Mr. Sanghi said, but it serves a larger purpose to my mind. It kind of unpacks the national security issues to a general reader who otherwise may not be, interested or may not even know about this.
Very true.
So it unpacks some very serious national security issues. It dwells upon the national security ecosystem, and it brings together something which is a very potent mix, and that is national security, politics, media, some bit of strategy, a little bit of international relations also when he talks about the meeting with the Israeli NSA. And of course, there is a lot of action, and there are plots and subplots. The characters are very well honed, extremely well chiseled. The motivations are very clear. The plot moves very smoothly. I must say that when I started reading the book, in the first few pages, when I realized that this is on that famous incident, I was a little skeptical. I said, "कि ये incident तो सबको मालूम है." And certainly, someone who has dealt with security, तो इसमें अब क्या इसमें नया निकलेगा? But I think within maybe first few pages and a couple of chapters, the whole thing turns so beautifully. And I think from chapter second onwards, your every page is you want to know what is happening on the next page, and that is because he weaved together the politics and the national security, and even the personal lives of the protagonist, and so many other things. And it never you never feel that it has been overdone anywhere. I mean, you feel that it was necessary. This much information is necessary. Otherwise, it was quite possible, because the whole plot has so you can go in so many directions. For instance, if you are doing surveillance, he could have gone into probably this Pegasus kind of a thing. He could have brought cyber security, etc. He could have done many things. But I think it must have been difficult for him to choose what to keep and what not to keep, because as he explained, he was reading a lot, and I'm sure there was a lot more that he could have added. But I think he kept to the plot, and there is this minimalist approach that he has followed, which is absolutely essential, and the book comes out so well. So to my mind, I think the apart from the three E's which were mentioned, it is also a book which explains. That is one more E I would add. Explains the national security system. And I would suggest that there should be more such, books and novels, or basically fictionalizing some of these things, because these are complicated issues, difficult issues. But when you fictionalize, people get interested and they can ask more questions. So overall, of course, the tempo has been maintained throughout. And in fact, before coming to this, I once again had a very quick 10 minutes read. And I realized that you can read the book in 10 minutes, although I took maybe about perhaps more than 26 sittings, because I wanted to read it. That's the number of chapters the book has. I wanted to read it more carefully and understand from the national security point of view what he had written. But overall, I think a very enjoyable book and a extremely creditable effort. And I'm sure it's going to be another bestseller for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. One more question I was having in my mind. Like in general, what happens when we see some movie or some thriller, web series, then a thought used to come in our mind that कि हीरो है इसलिए ऐसा चल रहा है, but in real life ऐसा नहीं होता. So what do you think, Arvind ji, means जिस तरीके से characters राजेश जी has built, तो वो कितना कितना रियल लाइफ के, कितना जो स्पाइज हो सकते हैं या फिर जो से इंटेलिजेंस ब्यूरो में जो काम करने वाले एजेंट्स हो सकते हैं, उनके साथ कितना ज्यादा रिलेट करते हैं? व्हाट डू यू थिंक?
नहीं, जैसे जैसे कि राजेश जी ने एक्सप्लेन किया, द प्रोटैगनिस्ट, द वाइपर हियर, he obviously had a background of all the NSAs, and it comes closer to the present NSA. But I would like to say that the national security advisor in our current system is much more than simply a personality who is leading, as to say, from the front to deal with some incident and so on. The strength of the national security system today is that the coordination, he in fact mentions somewhere that the coordination was not proper and intelligence reforms were needed. And he mentions some of those reforms also in the note which Protagonist writes for the Prime Minister. But of course, national security is far more complex. And if you look at the kind of NSAs that we have had in India over the last, say, 20 years. Now, they had at least all the previous NSAs, they had a very strong background in international relations and diplomacy. In fact, that was their strongest background. So NSA today is also at that level where he has to deal with the other countries and the overall strategic issues. Here, of course, also that has been mentioned because there is some meeting between the Israeli NSA. So I think the security system and NSA is quite worried about many other problems apart from simply just terrorism. Terrorism is, of course, this is a novel and he's picked up on terrorism. But he has to deal with the problems of military security, maritime security, space, even internal security, and so on. And the system of National Security Council, which has been created, is very important. And as NSA, he also deals with the apex national security institutions, which have been mentioned here, but many more. So I think NSA today is a far more complex character than the one which is which is a simplified version which has been presented here.
I think author is disconnected, so let us wait for him. Just let me check.
मैं एक चीज और मैं कहना चाहूँगा इसमें कि the plots which have been constructed here are extremely good, and the way uh, they have been crafted. But maybe uh, the book is really about the successes. So one after another, the protagonist Rudra Patnaik, he plans something and success. But maybe if had a couple of failures been also included in this, because not everything goes according to the plan. The plans can fail, do fail all the time. It happens. For instance, for the other side, that is the Hizbul and the ISI, they have been mentioned. For them, it is all failure. Al Mustafa, all their planning has failed. Whereas, so I think there is a very sharp divide here. Whereas in real life, I think there are a lot of gray areas. So if some gray areas are introduced, that would bring out as to why things don't work out the way they do work out. So that is, I think, one. And the second is very interesting. He has brought in a lot of politics into the thing, because Rudra is working very closely with the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is having his own problems in his government, and he's dealing with opposition parties. Then Jammu and Kashmir government has its own thing. I think that's a very, very smart thing that has been done. It makes very interesting. But on the security side, one is the kind of missteps that can sometimes happen, and also perhaps the use of new tools in security. That is also something which is very interesting.
Okay.
A connection, for instance, some kind of a today there is a whole network of terrorist groups and militant groups which exist, particularly in the AFPAC region. Afghanistan is one area, and many of these, he mentions this Jihad Council, United Jihad Council. So there is what kind of a networking takes place. That is one area, I think. So there are many. As I was reading, many things occur to me. But that is, of course, an author's prerogative. But as I said, he has kept it manageable and very fast-paced development. So I think he's deserved credit for that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir, for your insights. So now I would like to ask Ashwin Sanghi ji if would you like to give any suggestion, or you must have found some area like if you would have written this sort of stuff, then you would have written that in a particular way or something like that. So it is a kind of fictional question I'm asking.
No, Ankurji, as I said, I enjoyed the book. I think one of the biggest challenges for any writer of a commercial thriller is that you always, you end up doing tons and tons, mountains of research in order to be able to craft a novel. As I spoke earlier also, that ultimately when you are going to be spinning a yarn, you need it to sound real, and therefore you need to get all your facts right. So you have to do that research. The problem is that when you have a lot of research material in front of you, there is always this trade-off between story and research. My first reaction is that, oh, this is such a wonderful fact which I must bring to the attention of my reader. The problem is that sometimes that very fact could be actually slowing down my narrative. So being able to strike that balance between what constitutes a good story and what constitutes great material, sometimes that conflict plays out. And in fact, when I was having this discussion along with Rajesh earlier today, I said that I can see that conflict in your writing, because I can make out in certain places where you have wanted to present the material but have not known as to what it will do to the story, or where you have wanted to make the story progress, but for some reason you have had to take a decision in terms of what to keep out. And that is a thing which we always have to take care of. Ultimately, at the end of the day, what is a thriller? The thriller writer Tom Clancy had a very good definition for a thriller. Tom Clancy said, a thriller is a story in which you ask a question at the beginning and answer it at the end. So through the book, someone is wondering as to what the answer is. And you, in the process of the story, you keep generating even more questions in the reader's mind. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it is about balancing surprise and suspense. And the two people use these two words thinking that they are the same. They are not. To my mind, if you have a room which is full of people and the American president is shown in that room, and suddenly an assassin pops up and shoots the president and the president gets injured or dies, well, that is a surprise moment. On the other hand, if you see that same room and you see the president standing there, but now you tell your reader that there is an assassin lurking inside that room, then that is a moment of suspense because the reader is wondering as to what is going to happen. So, to my mind, being able to balance surprise and suspense is one of the most difficult tasks for a thriller writer. The other challenge that arises in most of such novels is the fact that most people talk about writing as being an art. Unfortunately, crime writing is not an art, it is a craft. So एक होता है जैसे an M.F. Hussain or a Picasso stand in front of a canvas and they see where their inspiration takes them. But एक होता है कारीगर who is, let's say, crafting a particular type of chair or a table. Now, by the time that he crafts his 100th or 1000th chair, it will be far better in quality and in terms of accuracy and in terms of detailing than his first. So whenever people in fact ask me that which is your favorite book, I say, listen, I consider myself to be work in progress. With every book, I hope that maybe 2%, 4% will improve. So getting that perfect balance is the most difficult thing. And considering the fact that Rajesh has not been normally writing in the world of fiction, but has been writing in the world of non-fiction, I would say that this is a very brave and a very encouraging and a very entertaining book in that sense. It's a very brave challenge that he has taken up. So my congratulations to him.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Ashwin Sanghi ji. You have given such a wonderful insight about the thriller and about what is suspense, what is, the other term I just forget.
Yeah, surprise and suspense. Surprise.
Suspense. Yeah.
And
So,
I think the particular genre that he is writing in, I think the wonderful aspect of these sort of books, for me at least personally, for someone like me who reads a lot and remains very, very aware of current affairs, is that these are the sort of books where you don't know when you are reading fact and when you are reading fiction, where the blurring line between fact and fiction is very, very thin. So, and for someone like Rajesh ji who reads my own books, I love doing that, where I'm playing with fact and fiction all the time. So I find it easier for my reader to assume that the entire book is fiction, because it's very difficult for many of my readers come back to me and say, could this be true? But think about this in our world of India in particular, and now going back to the cultural ethos of India. I mean, today, for example, we have an event which is the Ramayana, which we refer to as our mythology. But I call it itihas, because at the end of the day, it was C.S. Lewis who said that a myth is a lie that is based on some kernel of truth. So there is a kernel of truth somewhere. But you have 300 versions of the Ramayana. Which of those versions will you consider to be the truth? Similarly, if you start with, let's say, a epic like the Mahabharata, it started out as a work known as the Jaya, which was just 25,000 verses. Then it morphed into something which was 50,000 verses called the Bharat. And then it became 100,000 verses of the Mahabharata. Now, which of those versions are the truth? And what was each successive generation doing in terms of putting their own sensibilities and adding on their own layer of fiction onto it? But does that take away from the fact that there is a grain of truth in both those stories? The same thing I am saying about today's commercial fiction, that all of us start with something that we have read in the newspaper or something that we have seen in real life or an event that took place, and that becomes the basis of the fiction that we write. And that is what Rajesh ji has done.
Right. So, Rajesh ji, I would like to request you to read some part of your book for our viewers.
Okay, I'll probably read the. You see, I'll read a passage where the Home Minister's daughter, named Fatima Mir in the book, is kidnapped and she's taken to some hideout in Anantnag. And there the person, the chief of the militant group, which abducted her, accosts her. And then there is a conversation. And the conversation also demonstrates her own anger and and also the kind of double-facedness that the militants demonstrate in terms of various issues. So I'll just read a small passage. Now, this begins with the man entering the room where Fatima Mir is kept hostage. So, Assalamu alaikum, he said in a soft voice. Fatima did not reciprocate the greeting. Instead, she asked, "Who are you?" "My name is Maulana Shoaib Beg. I am the chief of Al-Mustafa, which is engaged in spreading the teachings of Allah, the Merciful, the Beneficent." Fatima had heard of the organization, and from what she knew, it was engaged in anything but promoting peace and harmony. The essential teaching of Allah. "Really," she said. "Really," she exclaimed. "That's a revelation." Maulana Beg ignored the sarcasm and continued, "We work in the service of our God and aim to establish once again the rule of Islam, the greatest and most just religion the world has seen. And one of the means is to kidnap a lady." Beg seethed with anger at the audacity. He was not used to being questioned, and certainly not by a woman who wasn't even veiled. No doubt an indication of the spreading influence of infidels in Kashmir. In the immediate term, it created a problem for Beg, since he had trouble looking at her face directly. And so, he studiously kept his gaze on the floor. After a while, he spoke with a hint of menace in his voice. "Please control your words. Islam forbids women from behaving in this fashion." She hit back, "And Islam does not condone the kidnapping of women. Islam teaches you to be brave for the cause of humanity and not act in a cowardly manner like you have done." So that's one part where she stands up and shows in the mirror, actually.
Wonderful, wonderful. So before we end up this session, I would like to request our guests, if you want to give any message to our viewers or if you want to say anything. So, stage is yours. Arvind ji, Ashwin ji.
I think the viewers would certainly benefit from reading this book, Badjaru. because this is a very interesting book, as I said earlier. Uh, Not only it's a good thriller, action thriller, but also it explains the national security issues and the national security ecosystem very well. So for that reason, I think the author has done a commendable job, and I hope that in future also he picks up some themes like that. As he just read out in this passage, there are some serious messages. So the book also has a serious message. That is that national security, the terrorism is a very big threat for us, and it is not going to go away easily. Only a couple of episodes are mentioned here, but this is the threat which will remain, and we have to be alive to it. And this is just the book covers some aspect of it, but I think it also encourages the reader to read more about it. So I would think that in the classes in academies, in national security academies of various institutions, this book would be very useful for them to read and discuss. So many congratulations, Rajesh, once again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Ashwinji, would you like to give message to our viewers?
श्योर अंकुर जी, मैं इतना ही कहना चाहूंगा कि यू नो I have found in so many thousands of books that I have read, you can either tell a good story or you can't tell it. It's as simple as that. People ask me that how do you go about writing your books? I say, there are three very simple rules for writing good fiction. The first paragraph should be like a pothole where a person falls in and can't get out. So the story should suck you in from the first couple of paragraphs so that you can't get out of that story. Then every chapter should end with a hook so that it is not your conscious decision to go to the next chapter. And finally, at the end of the book, you should get that feeling of satisfaction that all your unanswered questions have got answered. And that is what constitutes a great story. And no amount of fancy vocabulary or great grammar or literary skills can compensate for a good story. Ultimately, if you're writing in the world of commercial fiction, when I'm writing my books, very often the people will say, I have a habit of saying within quotation marks, she said, she said. Very often my editors will turn around and they will try and change those words. From he said, she said to he observed, she remarked, he recounted, she thought. When it comes back to me, I again make it he said, she said, he said, she said. Because those words are not important. It is the story that is important. So, in that sense, by the time you reach the end of a book, you should know as to whether that story has been able to grip you from beginning to end or not. And that is the test of a good story, whether you are really having to make an effort to turn the page or whether the page turning is effortless. And I must tell you that save and except for a few areas where I felt that Rajesh ji has not been able to resist the temptation of adding some material that he had researched. But other than that, it is a story where the pages do turn. So I would strongly recommend it as a read.
Thank you so much, Ashwinji. Now I would like to request Rajeshji for his message to our viewers and readers. Rajeshji.
Well, the message from a writer is always the same to all the readers, to all the viewers. Please do buy the book and read it. You may like it, you may not like it, but that's for a later decision. For now, to make a judgment, you need to still read it. So go ahead and do it. And that's it. And I hope to write another book featuring the Viper soon.
If I may
But
say something,
sure.
one of the questions that I am always asked as a writer who has been around for the last 15 odd years is that what is it that makes a bestseller? And I have always maintained that there is one particular quality that writers need to have, and that quality is known by the Hindi word besharam. You have to not only be a good writer, but you have to be a besharam to market your book. So please, Rajesh ji, I think before we close up this session, all of us should hold up the book once again and make
Yes,
sure that we put in a few 10 seconds more of people
sure.
being able to see the cover.
Yes. So, guys, this is the book, and just get it from your favorite website or your favorite store. It is available everywhere. You can get it in USA, you can get it in UK, you can get it in Australia, you can get it in Singapore. Wherever you are, Garuda delivers internationally. So, so before I end of this session, I would like to thank our honorable guest, Sri Arvind Gupta ji, Sri Ashwin Sanghi ji, and our honorable author, Sri Rajesh Singh ji. And thank you so much, viewers. You have watched us patiently, and definitely I would like to request you to share this video with your friends and with all those who are budding authors also, especially who are having a thought of writing some fictional novel or thriller one, so they can get good points and good knowledge points from this video. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Thank you. Namaskar.
Oh, say,
Yes.
okay.
So, thank you, sir. आप